Okay, so the second video is about internal validity and confounds. And this is such an important point, issue in experimentation that we didn't address yet in the course. So remember internal validity, the definition we introduced a while ago. Does the design allow you to test the hypothesis that you presented? Boy, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. Just a bunch of words. So let's see if we can help you understand that. So remember, in an experiment, all groups have to be equal except for the factor, the IV, the manipulation, whatever the thing is that you're going to do. So internal validity exists if everything is the same except for the one thing that you're manipulating. Now, that thing also has to be construct valid. Remember construct validity? We've got predictive validity, concurrent validity, discriminant validity, convergent validity, face validity. That's all different. So that's whether or not the thing that you're measuring is a valid construct. This is, does the design allow you to answer the question that you've set up to answer? Now, the biggest threat, the biggest thing that could interfere, impedance of a threat to validity is a confounding variable. So a confound is any variable that systematically co-occurs with the independent variable. It's not controlled, and it can't be controlled. And statistically, I can't parse out later what impact that had versus the factor that I was trying to manipulate. Given that, I can no longer determine cause and effect because I don't know if it's the confound or the manipulated variable that caused the difference. So, an experiment to achieve internal validity, an experiment has to be designed such that only the independent variable is the cause, can be the cause of the outcome. And if that exists, then we can say, okay, given that nothing else was different, and there's a difference that we think occurred beyond chance, that difference must be to the factor. However, if more than one thing varies, then we have problems. So let's say this band Negate, let's say Negate wanted to increase the number of people that were listening to the band or coming to concerts or whatever. And so they design an album cover, and they want this album cover to have impact, so they test whether or not that album cover has appeal. And the top album cover has a blue box with the word upstairs, and downstairs is in bright white font, where the bottom album cover doesn't have upstairs at all, and downstairs isn't written in white font, so you can barely see it. So we could measure band identity, number of song listens, number of purchases of swag or even the CD. But is it because of the downstairs being in font that they can see or upstairs being visible? So this is their first album. These decisions will matter for them. The problem is, if there is a difference, we don't know which of those it is. So we can't apply that for other design types to improve our other outcomes. All right, so that was a hypothetical example. This is a real story. So my first year in graduate school, fall of 1992, I was recruited to be a Confederate in what's now called, or what we called back then, the Ostrolo study. It was the first social ostracism study that was done by Kip Williams in the modern era, published in 1996. Of course, that's 4 years after I came on the study, and data collection was already going on for 2 years. But the point here is that we have an example of a confound, not in this study. Hang on. And so to manipulate ostracism in this study, two of us would sit there and we'd throw a ball back and forth. And if they were included, we threw the ball to them too. And then the three of us would throw a ball. And if they were being ostracized, then after a bit, me and the Confederate would just throw the ball back and forth. Then we measured the DV was number of different uses of a knife you could come up with. And so the outcome of that doesn't matter. They demonstrated how ostracism changed behaviors. But what I noted as a Confederate is it took 2 Confederates per trial, and each trial took an hour. That was very expensive. Confederates are expensive. And we were only measuring targets, not Confederates as well. So as a graduate student myself, I thought things could be better. Now, the only example of a confound I can give you here is that my pair of Confederates were not the only pair of Confederates. There were male Confederates and female Confederates, and there were pairs that changed across time. And so the manipulation of inclusion and ostracism across the length of them collecting data for 4 years, Confederate was confounded with manipulation. And honestly, that's never been tested as far as I know. But that's not the point of this lecture. The point of this lecture is the confound that I witnessed myself in my own design. So as a graduate student in my 3rd year, I started developing a study that we called the conversation paradigm. So it was presented at Midwest Psych Association in 1998, but never published. I'll explain why in a moment. You can read about it in Gray 2015. I describe it in the Sources of Ostracism commentary that I wrote. I love that little paper, so feel free to read that. Anyway, in the conversation paradigm, what we did is we take a topic, we bring people in the lab, and then we have them engage in discussion on a controversial topic. Legalizing marijuana, the problem with birth control, death penalty, and so on. And we identified what they would think was controversial, and then we took 2 of the subjects out of the room and gave them instructions to ostracize when they came back in. And then we measured nonverbal behavior, participant responsibility, and emotions on the outcome. However, we learned quite early, because during suspicion checks, we learned that everybody was recognizing that the 2 people that left when they came back were ostracizers. And so we had a fatal flaw, and that fatal flaw was a confound. And so we systematically covaried actors leaving the room, the actors, the sources of the ostracism. When they left the room, they were the only ones that left. So one time they started screaming, and I had to come in and stop the interaction. So we resolved that by taking one actor, one source, and one target out of the room to receive instructions. And then all of a sudden we didn't have any problems. We got 10 groups done before I moved on, and then I started my first job. But what happened was what was working with 22,000 students at University of Toledo wasn't working at all at Monmouth College with 900. And the problem was, as soon as they got done doing the study, they went out and told all their friends that they were in a study that was measuring ostracism. And so everybody knew what was going on. So it's a failed study. The study failed, and we moved on. So experiments offer the ability to draw causal inference because we have manipulation. What do experiments have that studies do not? We manipulate. Some of you have been calling your papers, you've been talking about experiments, but the CV19 study is not an experiment. Most of your pre-registered proposals are not experiments. The framing adulthood question, my part of that question is absolutely an experiment, but your part of that question may or may not be. So it's important to understand what an experiment is. Secondly, all studies engage in control, but only experiments manipulate or change something. That's why it's inference. And then confounds threaten internal validity. Internal validity, can I measure what I intended to measure? And a confound makes it impossible to do so. I'll see you in the next video.